You all have been fantastic in communicating with me, and I really commend you for being part of your government, for trying to help make things better. I come from Capitol Hill, and on Capitol Hill you respond to everybody who gets in touch with you. If you don't, you'll find that your boss no longer has a job. So I view it as part of my duty to communicate with people, but it's actually my great benefit to get information from you. And I've learned a lot, and I very much appreciate that ongoing dialogue. Before I begin, I did want to tell you about a new effort that I'm trying to spearhead at the Commission that will help give the others at the Commission as an entity, your information, that allow you to benefit them. We don't have an Office of Consumer Affairs or Consumer Education, and I think it's something sorely in need. We need to be more responsive. We have dedicated professionals at this agency, but all too often we don't respond to folks, and we don't do so when we do in a timely manner, so we need to be a lot better. I'll give you an example. Shortly after I became a commissioner in 2007, I gave this speech that I know some of you are familiar with, entitled "The Cop on the Beat." And people started emailing me after that. I think I responded to about 400 individuals. And as a result of that, I've had this ongoing dialogue. But the agency, the CFTC, didn't respond until May of the following year. May of the following year. Just unacceptable, I think. And it really doesn't reflect the hard work that people at this agency do. In addition to just communicating with people, I think there's more we can do on a proactive basis to alert folks to all the scams that are going on. I've talked about in the wake of the Madoff scandal, the rampant ponzimonium that's going on not just in the country but all over the world. And a lot of times these scams prey on the most vulnerable among us, people with limited incomes and good hearts. And I think we have a responsibility to try and alert folks to these types of scams that are going on. And finally, we have, I think, a responsibility to increase financial literacy in our schools, in our colleges, and I think an Office of Consumer Education or Consumer Affairs, if you will, would be very helpful. So that's one thing that I'm working on. Now let's get to the subject at hand, why we're here, talk about metals. First of all, I wanted to mention the investigation that's been going on since September 23rd of 2008. After months and months of talking with many of you, and I know some of you are on the call who had an ongoing dialogue about specific examples where you thought there were abnormalities in the market, and some even had a sense that something was coming up. And so what I would do is send these to our surveillance staff. Sometimes I would send them to our enforcement staff, and they would get back with us. Sometimes they'd get back with me individually. Sometimes they would get back with the Commission as a whole. We have surveillance meetings every Friday, closed-door surveillance meetings, and they would go through the details. And while I can't give you any of these specifics, I can tell you that by and large, these things were explained in one manner or another. Now, sometimes I felt like that was all right, but I'm not an economist, and I'm not an expert on these individual markets. And other times I felt like maybe something was desiring. And that's why Commissioner Dunn and myself called for this silver investigation. Now, it's been going on for a long time, as I say. It started September 23rd of 2008. But it's not a long time when you look at our regular investigations. These things take a long time. We just completed earlier this year a cotton investigation that took almost a year and a half. And so investigations, to do them in the correct way, take a while. But the most important thing to know is that this is an inclusive investigation, one like we have never, ever done before. It's unprecedented. Some people have said that, well, this is the fourth investigation and you never find anything. It's not. The Enforcement Division has only had one investigation, this one, since 1979. And as you all know, that was the Hunt brothers. So this is the first time that our Enforcement Division has actually undertaken an investigation. We've looked at several 100,000 documents. We've taken dozens of witness testimony. And I believe that we have a window of success here and that we are making significant progress. I don't regret that this investigation is going. Certainly, I would like it to have concluded sooner, but the most important thing is that we get it done right. And speaking of right, let me talk a little bit about some of my friends on the right who I think used to just say to me, let the free markets roll. Let the free markets do what they will and business will flourish. And that's really what happened since 1999 for the last 10, 11 years. And we deregulated the banking industry. They had these exotic high-wire mortgages. Markets were deregulated. And the result is we saw Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and AIG. So letting the free markets roll, actually, it rolled us all. Hadn't worked out so well. So now my more conservative buddies, and I have many of them, are saying we need a little bit of regulation. We need what I call rational free markets. That is, markets with some sideboards to control, ensure that there's no excess speculation, excess concentration in markets, not just the metals markets, but also in all the rest of the futures markets. So we're working on that effort. And these regulations, and you know, regulations get a bad name once in a while, most of the time, and I don't like a lot of them, particularly as we're coming up on tax time. But there are some pretty good regulations out there. Speed limits are pretty good. Health and safety, I use nutrition labeling every day. And good, sensible market regulations can be a good thing too, if they're done correctly, if they're done with a sense of balance, where you equate on the one hand the needs of business to compete both domestically and internationally, and on the other hand, the ultimate desire on the regulator's part to ensure that customers, that consumers, that taxpayers are protected. Number one goal, keeping the eye on that prize. So that sense of balance is important. There's a real value in having appropriate regulations. And if we maybe went too far to the right back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the question is, can we go down the middle of the road and put these appropriate sideboards on value regulations? And when I say value regulations, what I mean are regulations that are based upon commonly held desires or wishes of the public. And there's three that I want to talk about briefly here today. The first one is something that you all know we're going to be talking about on Thursday at the metals hearing, and that is position limits. Some of the people in the blogs and the newsletters have said there's 43% of the market, and that's just unconscionable. Our folks here say, well, it's, I think, 41% rather. And some of the folks here at the CFTC have said, well, no, it's 23%. Those numbers really don't matter too much to me because I think they're all too high of a concentration, whether or not it's 23 or 41%. But get this, there is no law or regulation, except for in the spot month, on how many positions can exist. So you could have 60% of a market, and currently there's nothing that we as the regulator can do. It's enough to give an attentive regulator night terrors. I can go pretty nuts thinking about the concentration that could exist under the current modus operandi of our regulatory regime. So that would be a valuable regulation to have position limits on metals. And as many of you know, I thought we should have included it in our proposal for energy in January. I also think we should bring the soft agriculture commodities into the fold and have position limits for them. Essentially all commodities of finite supply, I think we should have some sensible position limits on. But we're going to start on Thursday talking about metals. So the second value regulation that I want to talk about is manipulation. A lot of you will say to me in emails, they're manipulating the market and you should just stop it. Well, first of all, I use that phrase manipulation myself, and in the common parlance, as you're talking with your friends, your colleagues about it, you're meaning they can move, it moves the market. But what people don't really understand, although I've tried to communicate this with many of you, is that manipulation under the law is a really, really high hurdle for us to jump. And in fact, we've only had one case in 35 years. It was under appeal, and the Supreme Court just yesterday denied that they were going to hear it. So one case in 35 years is all we've been able to prosecute successfully for manipulation. Clearly, our manipulation standard under the law is broken, which is why I think we need another value regulation here. This sort of reckless behavior, this behavior that contorts markets, whether or not it's manipulation or something else, we need to be able to prosecute it and actually put people in jail. And so I've been urging Congress to include such a change in the financial regulatory reform. The Senate just yesterday passed a bill in the Banking Committee. I'm hopeful the Agriculture Committee will put out a bill soon, too. The Agriculture Committee is the committee that has jurisdiction over the CFTC. The House last year passed a bill, and it did have a change in this authority, but not as strong as I would like. So that's the second value regulation. And the third value regulation is the over-the-counter markets. A lot of you will say to us, well, there's not a supply of physical silver, there's not a supply of physical gold that matches up with the futures, and the important part for us is, while we can look at the physical supply as part of our mandate, it's not something we do all the time. And the bigger 800-pound gorilla for us is that the over-the-counter markets, which are hundreds of trillions of dollars, we don't see them at all. They're entirely dark markets. We've got blinders on when we are trying to regulate the regulated exchanges, those that are approved by the CFTC, when the over-the-counter markets are continuing to trade, and they can have an impact with large trades on price discovery on the regulated exchanges. And as we know, the regulated exchanges are what drives price that people pay for everything from metals to a gallon of gas to a home mortgage. So these over-the-counter markets are hugely important and something that we need to get authority for. We need professional-grade regulatory tools, and we need them soon. If we've learned anything in the last several years from this financial fiasco, it's that we need to have an enhanced handle on what's going on where we don't see it. So that pretty much concludes my remarks. Look, we've got a long way to go. We start on Thursday on metals. I'm pleased that we're doing it. I hope that it will be educational, not just for my fellow commissioners, but also for the public to hear how we do look at some of these markets. Because as I say, I don't think we've done as good a job as we should have on communicating. Not because we're not doing good work, not because there aren't hard-working professionals here in this building and in New York and Kansas City and Chicago, but because we don't communicate and effectively let people know what we're doing. So position limits, manipulation authority, OTC authority, there's a lot we have on our plates and a lot we need done. But I'm optimistic that with those, we will be more like the police department, where we're trying to deter crime, deter fraud, abuse, and manipulation, as opposed to a fire department that merely comes in after the fact and tries to react to the problem. So we have a lot to do, we can do better, and I have a lot of confidence that we're going to do better in the future. So I'll leave it there for now.